review movies new and old. You can watch the show on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter under the Let Me Bend Your Ear podcast. You can listen wherever you get your podcast. Please rate and review the show on your app of choice. You can email the show at bendyyourearpodcast@gmail.com. Please visit the podcast website at letmebendyyourear.com. All the episodes are available there. On this episode, I'm going to review Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1, co-written and directed by Christopher McQuarrie, starring Tom Cruise. Now, of course, if you know these series of films, they're hugely popular, some of the best action-adventure films ever made, which goes all the way back to 1996 with the original Mission Impossible, which was directed by Brian De Palma and starred Cruise, Emilio Estevez, and had a script written by Robert Towne, the co-writer of Chinatown. And that started the series of films that have continued on through today. So obviously it's been one of the most endearing characters that Cruise has ever played. And in this film, this is the third film, again, directed by Christopher McQuarrie. He came on for 2015's Rogue Nation, and then also co-wrote and directed 2018's Fallout. So if you've seen those films, I haven't reviewed them for this podcast, but if you've seen those films, those are fantastic. Rogue Nation is probably, I think, the best. Fallout is really good, but Rogue Nation is phenomenal. That's a great movie. And this movie follows in that footsteps. So these are some of the best action-adventure movies, like I said, of the last decade. It's pretty incredible when you have a series that's been on and you're on your seventh film that you can boast the quality of what you bring. And for Tom Cruise especially, it's kind of indicative of the unprecedented career he's had in cinema. And actually, this movie is a piggyback off of Top Gun Maverick, and you know I've reviewed that movie for the podcast, and obviously when that movie was going to come out, I was skeptical that he was revisiting that character from the 80s, and would that be a good movie? I think I was pretty skeptical, like a lot of people, and to my astonishment, that movie was fantastic. So this follows in that footsteps. So Tom Cruise, obviously, he definitely cares about the audience, cares about making blockbusters, and this is no exception. So let's get into the review of Dead Reckoning. So the movie opens with a Russian sub in a combat with another sub, an enemy sub, that shoots a torpedo, and the Russian sub is trying to do maneuvers to evade. And as that sequence unfolds, what ends up happening is the submarine that they think they're fighting and the torpedo that they think that submarine shot at them is actually not real. And the torpedo that they shoot turns around and destroys the submarine, sinks it. So we find out early in the film that what happened was this was a result of artificial intelligence, AI. So this is a timely subject matter with artificial intelligence. If you watch the news at all, there's controversy about the use of artificial intelligence in all kind of facets of life. And is it dangerous? Is it going to help us? And of course, you always get the scenario of Terminator when the intelligence becomes sentient and then attacks the human race, which is basically the plot of Terminator. And they reference this going sentient in this film as well. So, of course, Tom Cruise's character is Ethan Hunt. He is the leader of the Impossible Mission Force, IMF. So, of course, that's the thread through all these films. And, of course, he works still with Luther, played by Ving Rhames, and Benji, played by Simon Pegg. So what we find out also early in the film is that there is a key that's split in two that has to be put together. And this key unlocks the secret to running the AI, which in this movie is called Entity. So, of course, with a runaway AI, it basically has access to every single computer on the planet, every single cyber system, every single military system. Anything that runs on computers can be infiltrated by this AI. So Ethan is recruited by Kittredge, who is played by actor Henry Czerny. So, which was a great surprise in this particular movie. Henry Czerny was in the original Mission Impossible as the leader of the IMF. So he hasn't been in any of these movies since the first one. So it was pretty cool to see him pop back in this film as a full circle back to the original Mission Impossible film from 1996. So that was very cool. So basically, Kittredge recruits Ethan and his team to obtain the key, get it back to him. So now he's the head of the CIA. And also early in the film, you're introduced to the Director of National Intelligence, played by Cary Elwes, the actor best known for Princess Bride, Glory, a very good English actor. So he is the Director of National Intelligence. who is finding out about the IMF, which he didn't know, and the race to get this key. So in Abu Dhabi, where the film, early in the film takes place, they are trying to retrieve the key before it's sold. And then you have actress Hayley Atwell, who's a new participant in this series of films. She is a thief that pickpockets the person that has the key. So this complicates the situation for Ethan. So basically, he's trying to get the key, try to figure out how to outsmart her. She's trying to outsmart him and evading him in multiple areas, which leads to a series of fantastic action sequences that comprise the film. It's very, very well done. Hayley's character's name, Grace. So there's this outstanding chase sequence in Rome. There is a phenomenal train sequence, and of course there's a sequence where you've seen in the trailer where he's on a motorcycle and jumps off a cliff. It's unbelievable. He's still doing his own stunts still. It's phenomenal. And these action sequences are nonstop. The plot moves forward quickly. This movie clocks in at about 2 hours and 45 minutes, so it's creeping on 3 hours. And in this podcast, I've talked about the length of movies, and a lot of times that length is prohibitive in enjoyment of the movie because it feels bloated. This movie does not do that. This movie moves quick. There's no lull at all. So that running time is fantastic, and that's just a testament to the great pacing of Christopher McQuarrie's direction here. The music is fantastic. Actually, I didn't look up the composer. I should have, but obviously you've got the Lalo Schifrin famous Mission Impossible theme from the television show. But the music for this film is really, really well done, as it is in the other ones too. But the music is fantastic here. And the rest of the cast, like I said, you have Ving Rhames back, Simon Pegg back. You have Rebecca Ferguson playing Ilsa Faust, also from Rogue Nation and from Fallout. So she's back as well as the MI6. At this point, she's a former MI6 because she's been expelled from the MI6, but she's assisting the team as well. And as I stated, Hayley Atwell. You also have Vanessa Kirby returning as the White Widow, the arms dealer that appeared in Fallout as well. And as it appears, she is the daughter of Vanessa Redgrave's character, again, back in the original Mission Impossible, the arms dealer. So that's her daughter. So again, a reference back to the original film. And then Esai Morales, great actor from the 80s. He pops up now and then. He's fantastic as well. He plays Gabriel, who is another person from Ethan's past. There is a flashback sequence with Gabriel and Ethan where Gabriel has murdered a woman that Ethan knew, and this actually predates him joining the IMF. So they refer back to that. So that incident with Gabriel resulting in the death of that woman prompts Ethan to join the IMF. So they reference that, and so of course they have a history. And Gabriel in this film is a terrorist as well, and he is working along with the AI. So the AI is communicating with him to tell him what to do, and basically he's the main antagonist of the film. But of course you've got him as an antagonist, the AI as an antagonist. You have the CIA who's chasing Ethan and his team because they always do things rogue, off grid. So they're being chased by that. So you've got multiple strands of action going on at the same time, which contributes to the pacing of the film, which is nonstop action. Like I said, there's no lulls. One of the great strengths of this, and which shows the great strength of the screenplay as well, when there's not action going on, when there's dialogue to move the story along, even that is interesting. That is not dull. That is not boring. And those scenes don't last too long where you're going, okay, what's going to happen? They serve the purpose to move the story forward to get you to the next action sequence. And they do that very, very well. And you care about the characters and what's at stake. And of course, just like in any Mission Impossible movie, there are many things at stake, and terrible things happen. And, the result of actions lead to dire consequences for certain people, and that's just the way all these movies work, and this movie is no exception. So like I said, it's a 2 hour 43-minute film that does not feel like it, which is the best compliment I can give it. Again, the acting is fantastic all the way across the board. Tom Cruise is always fantastic. He puts his all into everything he does and into this role as well. And like I said, it's great to see Henry Czerny back. Rebecca Ferguson is great. Ving Rhames, Simon Pegg, they've been in all these movies together, so it's like a well-oiled machine, and they do this well. But it doesn't feel like a retread. It doesn't feel like a a rehash of something that they've done before. It's just bigger, more impactful. They're just trying to go bigger and bigger every time, and it's working very, very well. One of the things that I noticed as I was watching, going through Mission Impossible, is comparing it to a movie I just reviewed a couple of episodes back, which was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. You can go back and listen to that episode. But long story short, as far as that film in comparison to Mission Impossible, my issues with Dial of Destiny, and as I said in the podcast, the movie is watchable, but it's tough when you're comparing Dial of Destiny to Raiders of the Lost Ark, which to me, and I've said it and I'll say it forever, is the greatest action-adventure movie ever made. It's perfect. That's a high standard that you have to meet, and it's tough. And my issues with Dial of Destiny are the fact that there's too many times in the movie where it's just not moving forward. Non-stop action is just not there. It's not there. There's some great action sequences, but it's just not enough for that movie. And that movie also clocks in at actually about the same time. I think it's about 2 hours, 45 minutes. So it's almost the same length as Mission Impossible. And you can see the difference in the two movies. Because I was thinking about that literally when I was going to think about this review and watching the movie last night, was how Mission Impossible succeeds in the areas where Dial of Destiny does not. And that's why Mission Impossible is just a higher level of action film. And like I said, part of that with Dial of Destiny is you're dealing with an 80-year-old actor playing that role in a heavy action movie where you have Tom Cruise, who shockingly he's just turned 61, is still doing all of his stunts and still looks, like he can do this for another 30 years. It's insane. So that's tough there. But like I said, these Mission Impossible movies seem to try to top themselves. And like I said, now I will say, and I'll get to my star review momentarily, but what I will say is, again, it's really, really good. I still think of the three, Rogue Nation, Fallout, and this film, I still think Rogue Nation, the first of the three that McQuarrie has directed, I still think that one's the best one. Now, that being said, Fallout and this movie are fantastic. So they've set a high bar for themselves. So every one of those films are phenomenal. But I still think Rogue Nation, I would give it a tick. It's just the story, everything about that movie is really, really, really good. But again, Dead Reckoning Part 1 is great. So the Part 1, don't let that, not that it would dissuade you from watching the movie, but one of the great things about this Part 1 movie is, even though we know there's another one coming, the second part of this film, it's not something like Avengers Infinity War, where there was an ending where you knew they kind of left stuff hanging for Endgame. In Dead Reckoning here, they end this movie. They leave something there, but it's a self-contained movie, which is really cool. Even though you know it's part one, the way this particular story ends has an end, but leaves it open for that there's more things to come and repercussions of things that have occurred in the film that you just watched. So they really did a great job of not having an ending where you're going, oh, come on, where they don't leave you hanging, which is great. It's not a cliffhanger. This part of the story ends, but there's another one coming, and there's things that are going to happen as a result of what's happened here. That's going to be a continuation of Dead Reckoning Part 2, which I think was supposed to come out next year. I have to double check, and I'll post it later. But I think they pushed it back a year, so I think it's not going to come out till 2025. I'll check that, and then I'll confirm it on my social media. But again, they ended this one here, so don't let the Part 1 go, well, I'm just going to wait. Don't do that. It's self-contained. Really, really well done. Like I said, you've got locations all around the world. You've got Rome, Abu Dhabi, Venice. Just a fantastic globe-trotting action adventure. And again, like I said, these Mission Impossible movies have set the high, high bar. So like I said, and I posted it earlier today on my social media, I don't watch as many movies as most critics do. I don't get to go to every single movie. But we're past the halfway point of the season. So of the movies I've seen this year, the top 3 movies I've seen this year, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, this film, Dead Reckoning, and Air, the Ben Affleck story about the Michael Jordan signing with Nike. I would highly recommend Air as well. I've reviewed it for the podcast as well. I was very surprised at how good that movie was. That was a pleasant surprise, actually. I really enjoyed it. And it's one of the 3 best movies I've seen this year. That's playing on Amazon, so check it out. It's fantastic. It's really, really good. But anyway, Dead Reckoning. Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Starring Tom Cruise, directed by Christopher McQuarrie. I am giving 4.5 stars out of 5. So on my scale, that is a highly rewatchable film. It is unbelievable. Like I said, I give it 4.5 because, like I said, I would probably, and I haven't reviewed Rogue Nation, I give that a tick higher. So I would probably give Rogue Nation 5. So spoiler alert, if I review it, that's probably what I would give Rogue Nation. But I think it's Dead Reckoning is a tick below it, but very, like I said, that's nitpicking. There's nothing in this movie that I didn't like. So I usually say things I like and things I didn't like. There was nothing that I did not like in this movie. Everything is fantastic. It's just, I think the story of Rogue Nation, as far as the political intrigue and things like that, is just slightly better than this one. But that's a nitpicking critique. This movie is fantastic. You should go out and see it on a big screen. As Tom Cruise is, preaching about it, he actually put that message again in this movie, like he did with Top Gun. McQuarrie and Tom Cruise appear at the beginning of the film. Right, people love Tom Cruise, thanking the audience. And like I've said, and I think Christopher Nolan is the other. I'm about to see Oppenheimer in a couple of weeks, the Christopher Nolan movie. I'm very excited to see that. Tom Cruise as well as a champion for the theatrical movie experience. So with streaming and with the ease of seeing movies at home, and I get it, I understand it. It's helped me as a reviewer to catch movies that I wouldn't normally be able to see in the theaters. But I am for the theatrical movie experience. I've been a movie fan since I was a child. To see movies from he makes these movies for the theatrical experience, and he appreciates the fans coming out to see it, and I appreciate him making movies for the big screen. That's what's going to keep Hollywood afloat. Hopefully the theatrical experience, I don't think it'll ever go away, but it's definitely been impacted, and I've talked about that in previous shows. Obviously the biggest impact of this is the superhero sequels, franchise type movies, which I love to watch as well, squeezing out the mid-level dramas that are made for adults, which is stuff you don't get. This is why I'm looking forward to Oppenheimer. This is why, even with Quentin Tarantino, I do love the fact that he's an original voice and he makes adult dramas that are original. Early reviews for Oppenheimer are very positive, so I'll be seeing that in a couple of weeks. And 70mm, I'm looking forward to that. It's coming out. So again, this is a movie to see on the big screen, made for that, and it's worth your money and worth your time. It's a fantastic film. So again, I'm giving Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 4.5 stars out of 5. So my recommendation is go see it. You'll have a great time. If you love the other ones, you'll love this one as well. It's a fantastic film. So definitely check it out. 4.5 stars out of 5. And again, I want to thank you for listening to the show and listening to the review of Mission Impossible. You can follow the show on Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. The handle is @BendYourEarPod. If you would like to support the podcast, if you're watching the video, you can click on the QR code here on the top left corner. Or you can go to the show's Twitter page and hit the tip jar there. This will help cover the cost of hosting the podcast. Thank you for listening and have a great week.